Ooh, nice.
Yep, good job.
Look, clean hoodie. This was a simple but tricky little project as the dimensions had to be spot on in order to squeeze anything between the jar and this blade cup. I ended up printing it just under 10 times before I got it right. The idea was to take this inexpensive jar and use it with my blender. This is a 2-litre jar and it's pretty typical for these to have pickled foods. This particular one had olives in it. And I assume the size of it is pretty standard, at least they are around here in Australia. I see plenty of these around. But since it seems roughly metric, being 2 litres, maybe it's not the case in the US. Although I doubt it will work with a different size jar since this was perfect. I realised the rim of the jar was the perfect diameter for the seal in the blender, allowing the glass to do the sealing, which is crucial since 3D printing and food can be a little problematic even with food-safe plastics. All I need to do is make an interface between the threads, but there's not a lot of room to work with, especially with this glass rim on the jar that leaves a tiny gap as it exits the cup. I started with the body. This essentially fills the gap between the jar and the blender completely as if there were no threads. This shelf is for that rim on the jar and you can see it gets ultra thin here. Though this is not a problem because the only force this section needs to transfer is to push down the buttons of the blender. Now all we need to do is cut the threads into the body. Here's the internal thread negative and here's the external thread negative. You can see once they're applied, it does actually leave holes in the part. Because it's so thin and there are some pretty nasty overhangs, it prints best at very small layer heights. I used 0.1 millimeters. It's so tight on the jar that it needs some encouragement with a hammer. This is actually desirable since you want it to be stuck on the jar and not on the inside of the blender cup, and needs to be fastened so that the glass protrudes slightly past the plastic. While this is a nice cheap hack, I think the original containers that don't bell outwards and have vertical fins do a better job of cycling the smoothie through the blades. But then again, if you want a giant strawberry smoothie, the files, both the STL and the OpenSCAD code, are up on GitHub, though use at your own risk, of course. I have a newsletter which you absolutely should sign up to. Just do it, trust me. And for those of you who are more like, I like the algorithm to tell me what to watch, there is always a subscribe button or both. Okay folks, I'll leave you with a time lapse.